Welcome back. Welcome back. Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report. Our next guest is my old friend, Dr. Brett M. Decker. Dr. Decker is a New York Times best-selling author. Previously, he served as a journalist at the Wall Street Journal Asia, lived over in the Far East, and, of course, he was the editorial page editor of the Washington Times. He currently sits on the board of advisors, I think that's the right term, for the USA Today's editorial page, and sometimes writes there, and is a professor at Defiance College in Ohio. He's a busy guy. But welcome back, Dr. Decker. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm looking, back here in the Midwest, it seems like things are gradually starting to shut down again. So I think we're going to look at a national trend probably. The South opened up quickly, and it seems like they're getting ready to do more lockdowns. So what that means for the economy and the election, I think there's a lot on the table.
It is. It's going to be interesting. I mean, part of what I hear from people is they like that the President Trump pushed to reopen. They like that he's pushing for the schools. But, as you pointed out, we were talking off the air. Again, we're talking with Dr. Brett M. Decker. The reality is when people are adjusting to the fear, right? And there's clearly, some people are getting sick, right? There are cases. Then, people aren't necessarily rational, right? They're not making rational decisions. And again, the biggest thing for me is the economy. You tell me, I know your background is, of course, observing the world economy too. The economy seems to be heading back, but it's not back. It's not going to be back in a month or two. So the question is what voters feel. If they feel a bad economy, they tend to punish the incumbent, don't they?
They do. And for a month or two when coronavirus started hitting, President Trump's numbers were staying relatively solid because people weren't blaming him for it. I think the thing is, the longer it goes on, his numbers are weakening, and part of that is, the media attacking him, the president maybe not always being clear about what his intentions are, but also I think they'll give you a little while, but if the economy keeps sliding for 9 months, then they start to blame the guy in the office, and I think that's what you're starting to see happen in the polls.
So we're talking with Brett M. Decker. I want to ask you about China because the Wall Street Journal had a front page piece today. The reporting was that China's not going to lead the way out of the global or lead the global economy in growth or lead. And that wasn't the phrase. I'm sorry, I'm missing the phrase. But basically the story went on. The reporting went on to say China's not in any position to sort of be the strong leader to get the economy going. And I think people in America miss that, right? We tend to hear, oh boy, China's eating our lunch, they steal our stuff, they're mean on fentanyl, they're all these things. They've got their own economic problems. How bad is the economic problem in China, do you think? What is the reality of the economy in China? Because they lie about it to the world, but what do you think it is really?
Yeah, I think a lot of the talking points you hear out there, or their talking heads, guests on TV that people see on the news, their talking points are from about 10 years ago in China, and they haven't been updated. So what we heard for years is, the Chinese dragon is the next superpower. By 2025, China is going to pass the U.S. economy. Well, all of that has been proven false at this point. So people they're stuck in a narrative that isn't really a threat anymore. They have so many internal dynamics that, they're used to providing, right? Their economy is export based, more than consumption at home. The world's locked down. So they're not, everyone's buying fewer things and less junk from China. That has a huge effect on China, but even more so, they have demographic problems. They're gradually moving from the countryside to the city. It's a dramatically graying population. They have millions more boys and girls, so that leads to all kinds of social issues. So this is a big mess that no one knows how. Right? They're clamping down on Hong Kong. Taiwanese officials are saying, "Oh my gosh, as Hong Kong goes, we're next." So this is a cauldron of issues that no one knows are going to work out. All of them have an economic cost, right? So in Hong Kong has a pretty small geographic footprint, but it's the most expensive real estate in the world. So what do? They have nowhere to go because they don't have much land. So they just keep tearing down buildings and building them higher and higher. It's enormously expensive architecture that they plan years in advance. Right now, all these real estate agents on these extremely expensive projects in Hong Kong, they have 100-story buildings. They don't know who they're going to fill them with now, because fewer foreigners and expats are looking to set up shop in Hong Kong as they clamp down on human rights. So China is this big question mark across the board. But what it doesn't have is any kind of stability to sort of displace us as a global superpower. And I think one thing you see is the United States dollar is kind of the go-to currency for the whole planet. That's not going to be replaced by the RMB, but by the Chinese yuan, and nobody, including Chinese, pretend it's going to be. So what that is kind of an underlying assumption that Europeans and everybody else in the world makes, that for the foreseeable future it's America because there's nobody else, and I think kind of the reality of the Chinese situation
is so when people say and like you, or when I hear you say that China's got its own problems, they've got and they have 1.2 billion people. Can you imagine what the problem would be? Like if people starve in China because their economy goes bad, they're not going to let CNN in to cover it, right? They're going to be mass suffering and all. So will we really know what is, how they're doing? And could it be that it's destabilizing enough at this point, or in this era, to make something dramatic happen in China?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the million won question, I guess. Can China become a failed state? And that's a bigger problem for everybody. Or to avoid becoming a failed state, they have to clamp down everywhere in a really tough and brutal fashion. And then how does the world respond, right? And then what does that do to their economy? So I think you have this kind of mixture of options. But the one thing that doesn't exist is this idea of China growing continually in the future. Their economy is about 2/3 of ours right now. So 10 years ago, they were saying they were going to surpass us in 2 or 3 years from now. So that's kind of subsided and isn't realistic. I think a danger is, though, with all these challenges, economic challenges, internal challenges, that they go to the course of action that a lot of people take, governments, especially tyrannical governments, take when they're in trouble, and they look to military solutions. And I think that's something we really should be careful about.
Well, and if you think about it, I want to ask you about this because you spend a lot of time in Hong Kong. I mean, basically, the Chinese have slowly but surely in the last year and a half, 2 years, effectively gotten control of Hong Kong, right? So, I mean, if you want, they didn't have to use military force, but, I mean, that's a big shift that maybe people aren't even noticing, right?
Yeah, I moved to Hong Kong 2 years after the handover, and every year, which was the handover was 1997, every year they restricted rights and took away some rights. So it was this kind of gradual movement for about decades, and now they're at the point where they're not even pretending, and they're saying, look, if we try you for a crime in Hong Kong, we can arrest you and send you to the mainland to face a mainland court. So that's pretty scary stuff for people in Hong Kong who are used to having Western-style rights. When the British handed Hong Kong to China, there was an agreement that China would respect the rights they had sort of as a colony, individual rights, and now those are all totally gone. There's no right to protest, no right to assembly, no right to free speech, no right to even know what your crimes are if you're accused of one. So I think it's pretty scary situation. And what it does is it gives Beijing a lot of confidence and that they can get away with whatever they want, and that's what makes the Taiwanese seriously nervous.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of Beijing, they say we just did that and nobody really got on our tail too bad. I mean, they're fighting with us over other stuff, but it sure seems like we can get away with it. Okay, I got to run. Unfortunately, it goes fast. Dr. Brett M. Decker, New York Times best-selling author. Thank you as always for your insight. We'll check in next week. Have a great week, and I want to. By the way, next week I want to talk to you about schools opening. Not just you're teaching the youth in college, but also we're watching a lot of the schools talk about the fall, what that means for the economy and all. So put that in your brain for speaking next week, and we'll take a quick break and be right back. It's Ed Martin here on the Pro America Report. Be back in a moment.